So we're back with part 3 of lesson 5. We've got our MongoDB server running locally, and we have our Node Express application connecting to it. So what we want to do now is we need to build a model. We need to define what a drink object is going to look like in this application. So Node and Express, it doesn't give us a models folder because we can run Node and Express. We can run static sites basically without data. So it builds routes and views. So we're going to need to create a models directory. So I'm going to go up to my lesson 5 folder. I'm going to create a subdirectory called models. And in here, I'm going to create a new JavaScript file, which I call drink. I'm going to call it drink singular. So the convention is that our models are named singular and our controllers are named in plural. So later on, we're going to make a drinks root controller and save it in our roots file. But the model is called drink. Now, a couple other things about the naming conventions. I mean, we could have used the word booze instead of drink for our model. The problem is if we create a model called booze and then insert data, then Mongoose is going to automatically create a collection called boozes. So it's probably a good idea to put words that pluralize easily with an S at the end of it. Okay. So let's define our model, and then we want to seed, put a few records in. So we want to create our model. So the first thing we're going to need to do is we're going to need to require Mongoose. Now we're going to define a schema for the drink model. We're going to define a schema. All the models will inherit, they will all be and we're always going to inherit from mongoose.schema. And part of the reason we're going to do that is the mongoose.schema has built-in create, read, update, delete methods. So we don't have to write our own. We can just execute those built-in functions of the parent class. So now we need to define the attributes of a drink in our application. What are the properties we should set? Okay. Well, yeah, these are the attributes of the drink. It should probably be self-evident. Okay, we don't need to define it. It's auto-defined in MongoDB, actually. Yeah, so maybe name would be a good place to start. And then within each attribute, this whole thing is one JSON array, but within here, if we have descriptions of each attribute, those are their own small arrays. So we'll set up a type, which should be obvious as a string. Should name be optional? Can we create a drink without a name? So we also have a required property, again, that's built into Mongoose. What error message, and we can actually specify a validation message right here in the model. So if the user tries to save without a name, what should the message be that comes back? So we'll have a name. You said type. Yep, so we can add type. So we don't need a related collection. I should probably not use the word type here. Maybe I'll call it drink type. Camel case. A string. Required or optional? Yes. Should the drink type be required or should it be optional? And that's good because we could actually create a drop-down list to fill the types, maybe, a radio button list. Any other properties? Maybe we'll set one or two other properties, maybe something other than a string. Okay. So we could do size. What data type for size? Well, interesting. Right, interesting question. This is always what we have to do when we're defining data. Think about the real world application of this. What do actual data values look like? And that'll help us decide. Well, Mongo's cool. Mongo doesn't care. There's only number. If we actually put in int or float, it'd actually give us an error. And this should be required.
Alcohol percentage.
And alcohol percentage? Okay. You notice?
Is there any way to concatenate mils or liters onto that?
Yeah, adding ml or adding L.
You have to add a new attribute that links to the side.
We probably would need a units
Yeah.
attribute. Sure. Okay, we'll do that. So alcohol percentage. Oh, sorry, yes. Here, I guess we should do a units. We'll just leave that as a string that they enter. An alcohol percentage could be a number. I think that's enough. So we've got a couple of numbers and 3 strings. So this really isn't all that different than defining a class in Java, right? We'd set up 5 properties. We'd assign a data type to each property. Now this class needs to be public, right? Because our controller, here's a diagram again, our controller needs to be able to interface with it. The model sits in between our logic files and our database. So it has to be public. So, yeah, thank you, Vaishali. We're going to export it, make the class public. Because right now, this schema is only visible within this file. So we'll call module.exports. And we're exporting this as a Mongoose model, which we will call drink. And notice I've capitalized the D, so that's the public name. When we refer to this class or this object, we'll refer to it, and this is by convention, So we're taking our drink schema that we're defining locally here, and we're making it public, exposing it publicly with the name drink. So now other files can use this class. So building, if we had multiple models, if we had other things in our store, like orders or customers, we would just define them the same way. Each collection in the database gets its own model. So if we have 5 collections in the database, drinks, orders, customers, suppliers, locations, we had 5 collections of data, we'd have 5 different models, each in its own file inside the models directory. Okay, so our code's neatly kind of organized. I think this should probably not be too confusing because it's kind of similar to what you've already done by creating classes in Java. Anybody have any questions about the model? Or seem to make sense? Okay. So the next thing we need to do is we need to set up a drinks controller, and then we want to do dispatching. So if we get the URL request at localhost 3000/drinks, we can load a drinks EJS view, and then we'll pass the data into that at the end. So inside of routes, these are our controllers. I'm going to create a new JavaScript file here, which I will call drinks. And this is plural, so there's an S on the end. Again, our models will be singular by convention, and the controllers or the routes will be plural. So this file is going to be pretty similar. So this is what Express gave us. The generator built this. We're basically going to do most of the same things. So we'll require Express. Batch the application one place or another. This code is exactly what the generator already built. Here, first 2 lines are identical. If you want to copy and paste them, you can copy and paste them from index.js. At the bottom, we'll make this file public. The rest of the application can use it. So we'll instantiate a router, then we'll set up some different route handlers, and then we export the whole thing publicly. So now we need a get handler. So here again, this part will be a bit confusing, but I'll break it and it'll make a little more sense in a bit. Because here in index.js, we're getting the root folder. Here we're also getting the root folder. So we're going to look at how this works. And then we'll have our callback function. You'll probably remember back in week 1, you may have forgotten the first time, we did a little asynchronous example. We were reading a couple text files, and we talked about the asynchronous code and the callback, and think about how strange that looked to see a function passed as a parameter to another. Well, we've been doing this for a month and a half now, so it's probably starting to look a little bit more familiar and a little less bizarre. So now we want to load the drinks page. We'll execute res.render. And we want to load a view called drinks. Now we haven't built this view yet. We'll build it in a minute. And we'll pass in a title of you can put in any title you want, whatever heading you want at the top of our drink list. And I'll put in a semicolon here to finish that command. So again, we're going to load drinks and we're just going to pass in a title. I'm just escaping that character. I want to use a single quote in my string, so I'm escaping it. Otherwise, because I have 3 single quotes. If I don't put this in, watch the color coding, right? Because it's ending there and then doesn't know what to do with the rest of the string. So that's our escape character. I think it's the same in Java, so you've probably seen it before. We used it in PHP. So our controller is going to look for a view called drinks. We now do. For the moment, we'll just build it where all we're going to have is our header, our title displaying in an H1 tag, and the footer. No data yet. So inside of views, make a new EJS file and call it drinks.ejs. So the views are our pages. So I'll right-click views. We'll make a new EJS file, which I'll call drinks. We set our code editor up last week for the HTML template for EJS files. Well, we don't need any of this HTML because we already copied this stuff to the header and footer. So I'm going to delete everything. And now I'm going to include my header and include my footer. You got it, Mahesh. So we'll include from our partials header. In WebStorm, if you haven't realized it, if you hit enter, it does the autocomplete. If I type include, I start typing partials, I can just hit enter here, slash, put in the F and hit enter. Saves me from typing it all out. In between, I'm just going to add an H1 tag and spit out that title. So when our controller calls this view, we're passing in some text as the title. And again, you all did this in your lab 4. So we're just kind of doing a repeat here. So now we have a view, we have a controller. If I go back to my browser and click my drinks link, what's going to happen? We did get not found. Why?
It's not in rules folder.
No, because when we hit drinks, the URL says /drinks.
Good guess. That's actually not the problem, but we'll come back to. I'm glad you raised that because we're going to come back to that point in a minute. What else? We've missed one step. Well, not the index page. Our index is okay.
We didn't add drinks to the index.
We didn't add drinks, but we didn't add it where? It's not indexed, John? You got it, right? Remember, the express generator, it automatically, whoops. The express generator, it creates those two links, right? It adds those controllers automatically, and then it runs app.use where it maps a particular URL, set of URLs, to a controller. So this is set up automatically, but if we write our own controllers, we need to add them, right? So we need to reference the drinks controller here, and then we need to map it for any requests that include that start with /drinks. So open up app.js, add reference to the new drinks controller. So now our app file is aware of our drinks controller, that this exists. Now the labs were done, your lab force, people did them in different ways. Most people just loaded all the views from index.js, and that's fine, no problem. A few people actually created a separate controller for each view. So you already did this in your lab if you did it that way. Doesn't really matter which way you do it. In a real world application, we don't need to create a new controller for every view, but we also don't just want to use index.js for all of the views. Why not? Let's say we have 50 pages in our site. What's the problem with putting all of the routing in index.js? There's a couple reasons it's probably not a good idea, even though it would work. So let's say in this application, we have drinks, we have customers, we have orders, we have locations. So we build all those views. Why do we want to have separate controllers as opposed to just using index.js? There's two reasons. Wolfgar?
You don't have like a bunch of code in one file?
Yeah, this file would contain all of the logic for the entire website, which would make it massive. So that's not a good idea. And what happens if, let's say, Jacob and Shivam are working on this together? How's that going to be a problem if everything's done in index.js? Yeah, you're working on the same file. By breaking this up, Shivam, you can do the customers, you can do the drinks, and you're actually working in separate files. You do all of the stuff for customers, and all of that logic is in its own controller. It's not related or connected to the drinks, so they should be separate. So we have separate models for the different classes and separate controllers. So every collection in the database, we have a drinks collection, we have a drink model. That's the class. And then you have a drink controller that handles all the pages related to drinks and does all the create, read, update, and delete. So we have a separate set of pages, controllers, and models for every table or every collection. So we've linked to it, and now, and Vishal, I'm going to come back to your point about the slash, okay? So tell the application to use the drinks controller for URLs starting with if we have /drinks at the start of our URL, we want to use the drinks controller. This will make our 404 error go away, and our drinks view is going to load now. So now drinks loads. Because now our application, it knows what to do with this URL. It knows which controller to use. When we get request at /drinks, it knows that our drinks controller is going to handle those requests and load a view. So That's why we don't need drinks in this get handler. App.js already knows when the URL starts with /drinks, go here. If I put it in here, I'm actually going to be creating a 404. To get it, I would have to do this. See, I've got it in there twice. So in effect, so when I go to /drinks, that's the home page. It's like a virtual subfolder. I haven't created a drinks subfolder, but it's in effect here I'm creating a virtualized version of a subfolder called drinks.
This is because we created a controller for the drinks, right?
That's right.
We didn't create that, we have to do the.
Yes, that's right. So, which is what you did in your lab, right? You had to put in / and the name of the particular view. But because we have the drinks controller, we don't need to specify /drinks. That's specified, that's already done here. When the URL starts with /drinks, use the drink controller. So it in effect has almost its own home page. So we're almost there. Our page is loading. We just have to do one more thing. Well, two more things. We now need our controller. Instead of just loading the view, we now want to use the drink model to query the database for drink data. We don't just want to load a static page. We want to run a query and send those query results to the page. Now our drinks table is empty. So we should probably seed the collection with a bit of data. In fact, it doesn't even exist yet. But if we put a few documents in, MongoDB will create that collection. So I'll put this code up on Blackboard because I can make it nice and big. I can't make it too big in my command prompt, but I can make it font big in Blackboard. So this will be a drinks insert. I'll make my, you can type this if you want along with me, or you can just let me type it and then you can copy and paste it into your Mongo prompt. So our command will be db.drinks.insert. We'll have name. Okay, what should we put in our liquor store? What do you like to drink? Here. Okay. So now we need to go back to our drink model, right? We need to look at our schema. We've got drink type, size, units, and alcohol percentage. The drink type would be? Okay. Size. Okay, well, just pick one size we're going to put in the store. You don't need all of them.
Just say 40.
Okay, so 40, and the units. Sorry, so units is ounces. Okay, and so I need to put the strings in quotes, but not the numbers. Percentage. 40? Okay, so there's our first one. Let's put maybe three things in here. So I'll just copy this and then we'll change the values. Okay, somebody else? Something else you like we should put in the liquor store? Okay. I'm gonna call it whiskey or bourbon? Whiskey, okay. Size? 100 ounces. Percentage? 40, okay. And you said sangria?
Yeah.
Okay. Now sangria is a drink type, so we need a name. What kind of sangria? That's actually the type. Quick, Google's your friend. Go find a kind of sangria. And tell me the name, the size, and the alcohol percentage. And then I'll save this, then you can copy and paste it into your command prompt to seed your database. If you want to put different values in, by all means, go right ahead. Put whatever you like in there. Did you find a sangria type?
White wine.
Sorry?
White wine.
Okay, does it have a name?
It says yummy white wine.
Okay. Yummy white. How big? How big what'd you find?
It's just like the size.
Okay, well, normally sangria comes in typically in wine bottles. So yeah. And alcohol percentage for sangria. Yeah, I don't think 40% sangria is going to be too popular. Yeah, we'll try 12.5. Okay, so I'm going to save that. So if you refresh your lesson 5, we can try to copy this. And I still have 3 command prompts here. If you still have them, down here, here's the Mongo command prompt we left open. So make sure you're using COMP2068 Friday, right? Because that's the database our node application is connected to. If we look in our connection string in global vars, I'm using COMP2068 Friday. So inside your Mongo command prompt, make sure you run use COMP2068 Friday. If you've closed this command prompt, I'll show you how to reopen it and get back here, because I'm sure somebody did it. So I'll just close it. So I'll run cmd and type cd node MongoDB. So I'm going back into my MongoDB folder. I run the command mongo, and it connects me to my test database. I'm going to use COMP2068 Friday instead, because that's the database our node application's using. Now I can just right click. You can't use Control V command prompt, but you can right click and paste and hit enter. And now we should have 3 documents, which I can check with db.drinks.find. So there we go. Belvedere, Jack Daniels, and Yummy White. Each one gets it object ID. So we've seeded the database with a few values.
It's not taking.
If you copied and pasted and hit enter, it should. I mean, it's the same code. I copied and pasted what I typed on Blackboard. Right click. You can't paste in your command prompt? That's interesting. I've never seen that before. Okay, well, if you have to, there's your code. I made it nice and big. As soon as you paste, it will automatically execute the first 2, then you just need to hit enter for it to execute the 3rd one. If you want to see the result, you type db.drinks.find, bracket, bracket. So now we have 3 drinks in our collection.
So when we basically next week, when we have MLab, we will do all this.
We may need to do it one more time, but except what we'll do is instead of in a local Mongo prompt, we'll actually connect to MLab, and they give you, you just copy and paste the connection from there. So we can connect to MLab right from here. So we may have to reseed it, or we could try to do an import.
I'm not able to paste the code.
When you right click,
I write it.
if not, then you'll have to type it. So now we just need to add a little bit of code in our drinks controller. We're going to need to use the model and then run a find operation with our model, and we're going to get back a JSON object with this data. And then we want to pass that JSON object to our view, and in our view, our code's going to look very similar to our PHP code. We're going to build a table, and we'll loop through the data and output a series of rows and columns. So on our drinks controller, first thing we need to do is link to the drink model. You actually need 2 dots. You need to go up 2 directories. So we're linking our controller and our model together now. The model doesn't need to see the controller, but the controller needs to see the model. So now we can call drink.find, because remember, we haven't written a find method, but our class inherits from Mongoose schema. And the Mongoose schema has a built-in find method. We may need to do one other thing. Let's see. So when we call find, we're going to get one of 2 things back, either an error or drinks. I have to just think whether we need to require Mongoose here as well. We might. Well, we'll try it. No, we're going to need to make a reference to Mongoose. I'm hoping we don't have to, because we're referencing drink, and drink inherits from Mongoose, the Mongoose schema. So if we get an error, we'll log it to the console, and we will render. Remember, the generator gives us a page called error. So we'll load the error.ejs file. There's our error handling. If an error happens, don't load the drinks page, load the error page that the generator auto builds for us. If we don't get an error, we'll put in an else condition. If we don't get an error, let's move this code here inside of our else. We didn't get an error, we got drinks back. So let's load this instead. So we're loading one of 2 pages. Our error page, if something goes wrong, our drinks page, if everything went fine. So here was our original code in blue. We've now wrapped it inside of this query attempt. We've added line 8, and we've added everything inside the router.get that's not in blue. Now go and refresh your drinks page, and let's see what happens. If drinks loads, then our query is successful. If error loads, well, we still have an issue. Drinks loads, okay? So it still doesn't show the data, but our query is actually working if your drinks page loads. I'm just going to go and try it. We don't have tons of time left, so I just want to go through it. So drinks still load, so I'm not getting any error. There's no data showing up, but the data is actually being returned to my controller in this case. Otherwise, our error page would be loading. So now if our find gets a list of drinks, we need to pass this variable to the drinks page when we load the view. We're already passing it a title. And let's also pass it an object called drinks. So not only are we loading the drinks page, we're also sending our query results. So we have one JSON object that will hold all of the data. Excuse me. So there's our complete code for our controller. So we're about 90% of the way here. We've built our model. We've connected our application to our database. We've routed the URL to our drinks controller, and our drinks controller is successfully running a query and loading our view. Now we're just sending the data off to the view, and we need to write some JavaScript EJS style in our view to actually display the query results. So I'm going to go back to drinks.ejs. Let's put on an HTML table. We'll use Bootstrap to style it, which we've done previously, and we'll create a header row with I guess it's got to be 5 column headings. We have name, and these will just match the properties in our model. We had name, type. Now for size, we don't necessarily need to put that in 2 columns. We could append the numeric value and then a space and the units together. So we'll only create 4 columns. So those are our column headings. And there's our header row. And I am just going to go a bit quickly here because there is another class coming in. I will put everything on GitHub if you don't quite get all of it. Okay. So now we need for loop. We used the for loop last week. We output a list of users that were in an array. We hard coded. We're going to start at 0. I is less than drinks.length. We'll open a curly bracket here. Down below, we'll just close the curly bracket. So for each document we get back in our collection, we want to create a row. And we'll create 4 columns. So the first column will output drinks, I. And my code editor recognizes the name property we defined in our model. We'll just copy this 3 times. This one will be drink type. We're going to put 2 values in the 3rd column. We're going to put in the size and then a space. And then the units. So it'll say, 750 space milliliters for our sangria. And this one will be alcohol percentage. We have 5 values, but we're going to display the size and units together in the same column. I'm just going to save and check this, make sure I've done it right. I think it's correct. And then I'll put the code back up for a couple minutes and then we'll have to get out of here. Sorry, I will show it again. So now when I go to drinks, there's our data. So we've appended these things together. This looks very much like what we did with our PHP application, right? It was either our movie list or our video game list or our beer store. Looked almost identical. But we have friendly URLs, which is great, right? No file extensions. They'll be nice and clean. I probably want to change my footer so it doesn't say COMP2084. It might be a good idea. Not sure. Okay, so here's our code again. And this looks similar to PHP. There's nothing really revolutionary, just using slightly different tags, and we're using the equal sign rather than echo. This syntax is also better because we have fewer, we don't have single quotes around the column names, and we don't have that extra set of brackets. So it's a little easier typing. We're less likely to leave out a quote or bracket and make a mistake. Next week when we come in, the first thing we're going to do is above this table, we're going to add a link that says add a drink. We'll create a new view, which will have a form. It'll basically be just a standard HTML5 form. And then we're going to have to write a post request in our drinks controller. Our post request will call the create method of our model and create a new drink. Once that's working, we're going to put delete links in here. And when you delete, we're going to pass the object ID. We'll run a delete request and we'll delete that drink and reload the page, just like we did in PHP. And then we'll add an edit link that'll go to a different form. We'll pre-fill the form with all the drink values and we'll hit save to do update. And then after reading week, we'll look at how to